Hello everybody. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. And that is we're going to be talking about power and how power is created, managed in the world as we know it. And we're going to be going through 4 different power domains and how each one of these power domains actually enables control of the everyday man, of the everyday person. And we're going to go into how they work, what they are, how they work, and most importantly of all, how they function in history, how they function now, and I'm going to try my best to tie it into something that is a lot more tangible than just sort of the theoretical stuff. Now, before I get into it, I want to tell you a little bit about my history. So, who am I? So, I'm Ashley. I'm Ashley Smith. And fortunately or unfortunately, I pretty much achieved everything that I wanted to achieve within the first 25 years of life. First thing that I thought I wanted was to go into politics. And I did that. I worked with the then Education Secretary in the UK. And I had the opportunity to go on and do more and more things in politics, in the political sphere. Now, I could have gone on to be an MP and do all the other different bits and pieces for the Conservatives. But I got no joy out of that whatsoever. After that, I got a good bit of advice from a mentor of mine, a political mentor of mine. He just said, "Hey, Ashley, the one thing you need to know about politics is there's no money in it. There just isn't. Until you get to a really, really high level where other things can happen, there's no money in politics. Why don't you go make some money, and come back when you're more developed, more well-rounded?" And I took that a piece of advice to heart, and so I did. I went and I started a business. It was coaching, consulting in small startups. I did quite well at that, and then I made my own startup, which was a tech startup. Now, I made quite a considerable amount of money in that startup. And over the course of about a year doing it, and I'll tell you more about that another day, honestly, I didn't enjoy that either. The money was okay, but my level of overall happiness and satisfaction was pretty much the same as what it was before I was doing that. So, I made money, yeah. I went into politics, yeah. And I've done all these things, and I found, well, I understand how each one of these things works and how each one of these things function, but it doesn't actually make me happy. So I'm not actually playing the game. And that's really important, because if you're playing the game, if you're enmeshed in these systems, you can't see them clearly. And if you can't see them clearly, you're constantly trying to find ways of interacting with this system. We'll just call it the matrix for now. Interacting with this matrix, you're trying to fundamentally understand how these levers work so that you can extract something from that system. Now, I'm not playing that game anymore, so this is why I want to talk about this system so that you can understand it better. So a few pieces, a few house rules here. Number one, I'm recording this around Christmas time. So if you can see a little Christmas tree in the corner, it's because it's around Christmas time, and I didn't want to take it down to record this. I think it looks really pretty. I think it's a nice little bit of light in the corner. But yeah, it's nice. It's good. And lastly, how do I know how these levers work? Well, like I alluded to earlier, I know how they work because I've worked with them. I've worked with people who worked with them. I've got friends who still work with them. I'm still forced to work with them to some degree. So I understand them. And that's why I'm able to talk to you about them. So, what are these levers? Well, firstly, I'm going to be drawing for a good chunk of this today. So you're going to get my special little Bob Ross. Hold on. So you're going to get my special little Bob Ross treatment. So you're going to get, there we go, happy little cloud. You're going to get happy little tree. There we go. right? You enjoy that. I'll be honest with you, the drawings aren't going to get any better from here. So enjoy this while you can. So, what are these 4 levers of control? Well, the first one you'll be well acquainted with. It is money. Of course, money is a lever for control because we all use it. We all have to use it. We know that we can see that the wealthiest among us have a level of control which the poorest simply do not. Now, that is money, and as I said before, we'll get into money shortly. The second lever for control is religion. Now, when I say religion, I don't mean faith. Faith and religion are 2 very different things. I mean organised religion. I mean Islam. I mean Christianity. I mean Judaism. I mean being a Sikh, Hinduism. Any kind of organised religion works the same way, no matter what it is. I said religion is a lever of power, and don't think just because we live in the 21st century that we aren't immune to the lever of religion, because we have a religion in the 21st century, and that's science and technology, and I'll get onto that in a moment. Then after money and religion, we have a third, and that third is information. Okay, information is taking abstract concepts, so the minutiae up and around here, right, and turning it into something tangible. Okay, so these are building blocks. This is what information does. It takes stuff which is intangible, thought, what's in your imagination, and it turns it through a process into stuff. Right? Information actually connects everything else together. It's quite an abstract piece, but it's a really important one. And the last, but by no means least, is education. If you've been to school, which I think you have been to school, you will know that what happened to you was that you were indoctrinated. You were brainwashed. I'm going to draw my little funny brain now. There we go. There we go, little funny brain. I'll make it pink. There we go. Terrible brain, I know. But you were brainwashed into believing all kinds of different things. And if that hadn't have happened to you, you would not be who you are now. And we'll go into that and all of these in much greater depth. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler here, okay? When we go through this, there is actually a fifth. Now, I know I mentioned that there's 4 levers of power, 4 levers of control, but there is actually a fifth. Now, I believe that this 5th lever, I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, is the most pervasive, most difficult to truly understand why this makes you into a slave. Now, I can't tell you what this 5th one is yet, because if I just say it out loud, you won't get it. But this 5th lever turns you into a slave, without doubt. Now, if I simply say what this 5th one is, you won't believe me. So we have to build up to this. So without further ado, I'm going to go into people's favourite topic, which is, of course, money. So what is money? Well, money, it's everywhere, isn't it? You've got dollars, you've got pounds, you've got euros. That's my funny shaped E for euros. You've got won, you've got dong. It is everywhere. It's all pervasive. Money is just a really, really, really efficient tool So we've used it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Now, money has been around for thousands of years. It didn't start out as some nefarious, power-grabbing mechanism. How it started was that it was in Mesopotamia, where around 2000 BC, so 2000 before Jesus Christ, around 2000 BCE, merchants faced a very practical problem. And that problem was, how do we move around all of this gold? How do we move around all of this gold? Because if they were robbed, that's it, that's everything is done, right? So what they did is that they went to a church or a temple, and they said, hey, we'll deposit all of our gold with you, the majority of our gold with you, and we would love for you to give us a receipt so that when we're travelling, when we get to where we need to go, we can exchange that receipt for gold when we get back in the place where we're going to, into another temple. And they will take the receipt and they go, yes, this is valid, this is you, great. That was the start of money. It started as a receipt. That is how it started. It started off as a receipt. It then gradually transformed into what we know today as fractional, reserve, lending. You can enjoy my joined up handwriting there. It's not very good. So how does fractional reserve lending or fractional reserve banking work? Well, now that you've got remember 100 in the bank, okay? In the bank. And the bank has kept 10 and has lent out 90. So now, in circulation, there is your original 100 plus 90. So the bank has lent out this figure to someone else. And someone else is then going to go, well, I'm going to put that 90, I'll make that blue, I'm going to put that 90 into the bank. There we go. And the bank's going to go, well, I know what we'll do. We'll keep it round numbers. And the bank's going to go, well, we'll keep 10 and we'll lend out 80. So now, how much money is in circulation? Well, you've got 100 plus 90 plus 80. So now you've actually got 270 in circulation. But the majority of this is fake. It was invented, right? It was invented by the bank in order to make money off of the interest. So this system is the underlying foundation of the entire financial system that we live under. That the bank lends out money and creates more money in the system than what there actually is. So let's say, for argument's sake, that over 80% of all the money in the economy, in the world, whatever it is fake. Right? It's not actually fake. It's just backed up by the bank, a country, an imagination. Right? It's backed up by pretty much nothing. So, what happens when we have a boom cycle? A boom basically means that our lending increases. Right? Our lending is up. And not only our lending is up, but the interest that we pay, interest, is low. Because if the interest is low and the lending is high, then what is being created? Tons and tons and tons and tons of money is being created. That is what a boom means. Money is being created from nothing. There was nothing, and now there is something. So what does this tell you about money? So what does this tell you about money? Well, it tells you that it is fundamentally infinite. If the entire system is built on turning nothing at all, right, this is nothing, yeah, this is nothing, into something, into cash, into pounds, into won, into yen, then what is it backed by? Well, it's not backed by anything. It used to be that it was backed by gold, by silver, by armies, right, or countries. But now, it's not backed by any of these things at all. It's backed up by what? It's backed up by faith. Fundamentally, our entire banking system is based on faith. Faith that we are going to pay back the what? The debt. We have a debt-based banking system. Now, that debt-based banking system used to be propped up by gold. Now, gold was a reserve. That was the reserve currency that held its value. But we don't have a gold-backed system now. Nothing backs it up. So all we have is debt. Now, I mentioned earlier about boom and bust cycles. Remember, a boom is when we are lending lots and lots and our interest is low. Okay? So what is a bust? A bust is when we realise that this is not sustainable in the slightest. That's when we realise that all of this lending that we've done, well, guess what? A good chunk of that lending isn't going to work out. So the market corrects itself. That's what they call a market correction. When the market corrects itself, it basically means that people realise that all of this debt that's being created isn't going to get paid back. So the market adjusts by saying, well, actually, we thought we had, 10,000 real dollar pounds. Well, actually, we're in the market, we have 5,000 dollar pounds. So when you have that correction, what takes place is that people go bust, right? They fail. The debt that people have, the interest on the debt that people have, it goes up. It increases, right? If you have a model where you are, 1% or a 2% increase in your interest payments can ruin your overall profit margin, then what are you? You're screwed, right? You're screwed. And that is why we have these continuous boom bust cycles. Because if we have something that's backed up by faith, which is what we do have, we have a faith-based monetary system right now, then it's inevitable. It is inevitable that people are going to go, well, actually, I think that a load of your bets are going to fail, and they do. Inevitably, they fail. Now, So I'll be honest with you, I've jumped ahead a fair bit there. So let's go back. Let's go back to how this started. So let's say that these banks, there's obviously there's more than one bank, right? There's a few of these banks. Let's say that these banks, they've been creating money within the system. Okay, remember that? Fractional reserve. Yeah, pretty much infinite. So they've been these banks have been infinitely creating money in the system. Well, what happens when, let's say, Bob, there we go, there's Bob, and his mates, there's some of Bob's mates, right, they go, well, I don't believe that we're going to get our money. Something's going wrong, right? I want my gold back. That's what it was traditionally. It was gold or silver. Something backed it up. Well, I want that back, right? Because again, what a bank would do is that they would take your gold, your actual thing of value, and they would turn that into a receipt. Yeah? That's what they would do. They would turn that into a receipt that basically says, an IOU. That's what these receipts are. It's an IOU. It's basically a promise. I promise that you are going to get this much gold from this piece of paper. Well, this piece of paper is only backed up by the faith, I'm just going to keep putting this as an F, by the faith that this actually exists. If they don't believe this exists, then this means absolutely nothing at all. And then what happens? The faith that people have goes down. So Bob here, his faith is rock fucking bottom right now. It can't get any lower. So what he does, he goes, well, actually, I want my gold, my thing that actually has some level of inherent value within the system. I want that back, please. And he convinces all his friends to do exactly the same. So what happens? Well, if this bank doesn't have enough gold for what they've promised in their invented cash, well, this bank fails. And that is what we call a bank run. That's what we call a bank run. Now, a run on the bank basically means that the bank runs out of money. So the whole premise of fractional reserve lending, fractional reserve banking, or fractional reserve lending, the whole premise of this is that the amount of time that you are going to need your money back is less than the amount of time that you're going to want more money, that you're going to want to receive lent money. So if this is inversed, if all of a sudden loads and loads and loads of people, right, they want their money back, right, they want their gold back, or they want their silver back, or they want whatever it is, they want that back, right, then this entire system falls apart. The entire thing falls apart. Because it very quickly discovers, because people very quickly discover that the money that they think they have doesn't actually exist. So remember, money is infinite. It is created by a banking system. It doesn't actually exist. Right? It's infinite. I'm going to keep telling you that. It's infinite. Don't believe that money is scarce. It isn't scarce. It is literally infinite. We make it. We create it. And in the modern age, absolutely nothing backs it up. At all. Right? So, if there is a run on the bank, what happens? Well, in the old days, if there was a run on the bank, these are all banks, remember? B, and this bank, is teetering on the edge. Right, that's a little seesaw, right? This would be, dead, basically. If they're about to get there, this bank is done. Right, this one is absolutely done. What would happen is that they would form alliances. So all of these banks, all of them, they all have a partnership with each other to say that if you, Mr. Bank number 3, if you have a bank run, then banks 2 and 1, well, we will support you. We will support you with that. So that bank number 3 doesn't go under. So if each and every single one of these banks doesn't go under, well, what happens? The system continues. The lie that money is somehow backed by something, that there's not enough of it, continues. Because if one of these goes under, then what happens? These two, well, they're in danger, aren't they? We don't know what's going to happen to these banks. They don't know what's going to happen to these banks. Because if this one goes under, then these two are going to be next. And it would create a cascade of doubt. Right? What is doubt? Doubt is lack of what? It's lack of faith. Right? We have a faith-based economy right now. So if we have no faith in the system itself, then the system fundamentally collapses. Right? It just collapses. And we saw this take place in the 2008-2009 banking crash. And who bailed them out? This big crash, the market basically went, well, there's no faith anymore. This big crash, and who bailed them out? No, it wasn't God, it was the government. Because the government can't let you know the trick. It can't possibly let you know that it's all an illusion. Money is an invention, a human invention. Now, I'm going to show you exactly how this has worked throughout history, throughout time. Okay? So, let's go to the PowerPoint really quick. So, I've talked here about fractional reserve banking, right? The system's fragile, of course. People should demand their goals substantially known as a bank run. So, they made alliances with each other to do that, right? And this was, we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago, guys, right? So, one of the worst things that you can imagine is that money is scarce. One of the worst things that you can imagine for yourself is that money is scarce. Scarcity, remember, look at the word. Right, look at the word. Scarce. Scary. Yeah? The whole point of this notion of being scarce is to get your brain to not activate properly. If you are in a state of fear, then you're not thinking. And if you're not thinking, then you go into the worst sin of all, which is default. Yeah? If you're in default mode, then you're just following everything that you hear. You're following everything that other people say to you by default. And that's what they want. That's what the people who have these levers of power want. They want you to be in default so that you don't do what? So that you don't think. Because if you don't think, you immediately go into default. If you feel that something is scarce, feel that money is scarce, then you're going to work harder. Yeah? If you don't believe there isn't enough to go around, there isn't enough to go around. But there is. Right? We could live with an abundant amount of food and infinite money. Money does not solve people's problems at all. What is in a person's mind? Right? What is in a person's mind, in their brain? Right? This is what solves problems. If we changed the way that we thought about money, we wouldn't have as many problems as what we currently have within our system. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned in this system is interest. I'm going to get on into interest in a minute. I'm going to quickly go through this so that you can really get an idea of the historical significance of money and how money functions, how money works. So, I mentioned before, money is infinite. It's creation by decree. There's no theoretical upper limit to how much money you can have. By the way, all of this is going to be on the school community. So, if you want to read it at your own behest, by all means you can. Right. So, modern banking, 90% is digital money, 10% reserve ratio. Right. So, 90% of all money is basically lent out. So, you've got the majority of money isn't actually real at all. It's just not real. It just is not real. Right. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned to you is interest, and interest is what we call usury. So some of you might not have heard of usury, but usury is one of the greatest and most evil things in our modern system. Now, this is how usury works, right? If I want £100, $100, whatever it is, right, and I go to a bank, the bank is going to lend me that £100, and they're going to say, well, we're going to give you that £100, but in return, we want 110 back. Right? So the bank have created this £100, and they say, well, now we've created this £100, we want you to find an extra 10 for us. I want you to just let that settle. Okay? Just let that settle for a moment. Breathe. Because this was hard for me when I first got it. When I first saw this, it was hard for me to get my head around. And if it takes a little while for you to, that's okay, because it is a bit tricky. Let's do a quick reminder, okay? Fractional reserve lending. Fractional reserve lending. Or fractional reserve banking, yeah? These things mean that if you deposit £100, this apparently is real money. Let's assume it's real money, right? Into a bank, yeah? The bank keeps 10 in reserve, and it lends out 90, and so on and so on and so on, until eventually you're at the point where you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of money dollar pounds, which honestly don't really exist. And all that you have in its place are receipts, which are IOUs. That's money. Money is an IOU. That's all it is. Okay? Now, with this IOU that you've got, this is the system that I've been talking to you about the entire time, yeah? That this originally was backed by gold or silver, but now it's backed by... What's it backed by? Fuck all. It's backed by nothing, right? It's backed by belief. Faith. Yeah? That's what it's backed by. Now, the bank has invented this extra 90. Right? This extra 90 did not exist previously. It didn't exist. It was invented. It was invented by the bank. So if the bank says to you, well, we're going to lend you £90. We'll call this person Tim. Tim. Yeah? We're going to lend you £90, Tim. But in return, we want an extra 10 back. So you now owe a grand total of 100. Well, where is this 10 going to come from? Because Tim here, Tim can't create money, can he? Right? Only the bank or a government can create money. They've got that special power where they can create money for some strange reason. But Tim can't create money. So where does Tim get that extra £10 from if it's not created? Well, he's going to have to get it from Bob. Or from Jeff. Or from Shirley. Yeah? He's going to have to get it from one of these other people. Now, where are they going to get the money from? Because they're living in the system too. They're being lent money by the bank too. Yeah? So where are they going to get it from? Where are we going to find this extra 10 of interest from if the place creating it isn't actually creating it at all? Where's it going to come from? Do you see the problem? The problem is that it can't come from anywhere. It cannot come from anywhere because it doesn't exist. So what does this mean? It means that usury is evil. The reason it's evil is because it traps people, fundamentally, in debt. And what is debt if not servitude? Slavery. Yeah? That's what debt is. Debt is an enslavement to something else. And in our world, what that is it is enslavement. These are chains, by the way. Can't draw chains to the system. That's what we're being enslaved to. Because if this person creates more and more and more money via lending, remember, if this person's in debt, what do people in debt do? Well, they fall into a trap and they try and get more. Like, they lend more. Yeah? Banks, what are they going to do? This person, they're being used by banks to create more money. Yeah? Are they going to stop lending to this person? No, they're going to lend more to this person. Because they're in so much debt, they're a slave into the system, so this person's propping up the system by their work. If this person stopped working, they'd stop paying. If they stop paying, then everything will be taken away from them. They're a slave. This is what they are. This is what they are. Yeah? So, now I've introduced you to the absolute evil of what is usury. I'll explain it a bit better in the PowerPoint. So, imagine a game where the dealer creates chips out of thin air, lends you 100 chips, but demands you return 105. Where do you get the extra 5? From other players. But they're all in the same position, all owing more than what was created. It's not a flaw, it is the system. Usury, which is charging interest on loans, creates a mathematical impossibility at the heart of the economy. Banks create the principal when they lend, but they don't create the interest. For you to pay back your loan with interest, the extra money must come from somewhere else. From other loans, which themselves require interest payments, which require more loans, endlessly spiralling forwards. This is infinite, yeah? The system is built so that there must be winners and there must be losers. It is built this way, on purpose. It doesn't actually have to be like that. It doesn't actually have to have a system where there are winners and losers. Everyone can be a winner. But because of usury, what that means is that someone is always going to have to be in debt. Someone is always going to lose. Because eventually the money's going to run out. Where's the interest going to come from? It's not created. Only the initial sum is created by the bank. So where is it? It can't come from anywhere. So a person must be a loser. They must lose, right? The mechanism explains why the economy needs constant growth, not because humans naturally require ever-increasing consumption, but because the debt structure demands it. Without expansion, the interest payments can't be made. This is why we have boom and bust cycles. Yeah? If we're in a boom, like I mentioned before, if we're in a boom, then debt is being created. And if we're in a bust, then debt is being eliminated. Yeah? So who wins when debt is being created? People with loads of money. Yeah? And who wins when debt is being eliminated? People with loads of money. Because what do people do? We know that money is an illusion. Yeah? Money doesn't exist. Yeah? It doesn't exist. It's created by banks. So what do people do with money? They take the money, which is, as we've learned, is just a receipt, and they put it in things which actually hold value. What holds value? Land. property, food. This holds value. Because what is this? This is real. That's what these things are. They're real. So when you have, when your interest is really low, right? Interest low, I low. Then they get loads of money, and they put it into this. And then when interest is high, well, what's going on? The value of these things increases. So if the value of these things increases, and the interest is also increasing, well, the interest on these things is increasing. So what do? You wait. You wait until interest is low again, and then you refinance this. You refinance all this stuff into more money, which you didn't have before, and you just do it again. And you just keep doing it. And you just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. This increases in value. The money itself is decreasing in value, but all of your wealth is in this. In actual stuff that people need. Because it's real. Money isn't real. This is why people say, put your money into assets. An asset is something that is real. That's what an asset is. An asset is something that holds its value throughout time. Yeah? Gold, technically, is an asset. Right? Gold's value isn't actually increasing. What is increasing with gold is that the... hold on. So what's happening with gold is that the value of money is decreasing, and in comparison to that gold, the perceived value is increasing. So the value of gold remains constant, yeah? It's constant throughout time. But the value of money decreases via inflation. Inflation basically is money printing. The more money that you have, the less valuable it is. Yeah? The more of something you have, the less valuable it is. If you've got like 1,000 apples and I want a pear, there's one pear, then the value of that pear is going to increase. So money decreases because the value of money decreases because of inflation. This stays constant, and the price of this seems like it's increasing, but really what's happening is that the value of these receipts are in fact decreasing. That's all that is, yeah. So, the economy needs constant growth in order to feed usury. If we didn't have usury, we wouldn't need constant growth. If we didn't have to force people to find that extra 10, 20, 30% on top of their lending, we wouldn't be in such problems as what we're in at all. So it's evil, right? It creates financial anxiety, it creates issues. Anyway, let's crack on. So I've already explained fractional reserve as a way in which you can extract money from people. You're reserving 90, you loan out. I've already explained this to you. Right? So the snowball effect is this. Interest compounds. The single fact taught in school as a neutral mathematical principle is actually a wealth transfer mechanism of breathtaking efficiency. A small percentage becomes crushing over time, turning manageable debt into lifetime burdens, transforming temporary setbacks into permanent servitude. I don't have a mortgage. Right? I'm very fortunate. I've got this house. I don't have a mortgage on it. If you have a mortgage, you are in servitude to the system because you are having to pay constantly. Debt creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety makes us not think. Scarce, yes, scarce, fear, right? Anxiety and fear. The more anxious we are, the more fear that we experience, the less our brain is going to function. And if our brain isn't functioning, then we become slaves, serfs, to the system. Now, I'm not putting any sort of morality on this, right? In terms of if you have a mortgage, if you have debt. I've got debt, right? I've got credit card debt, because I'm honest with you, this drives me mad. I will go through periods of very intense, deep thought, deep thinking, and periods of retreat into myself, where I'm not the best version of myself, and this drives me mad, and other things drive me mad. And then I return from that to tell you all what this is about. I'm not the first person to talk about user. I'm not the first person to talk about loans and interest and debt. I'm definitely not. But if this is the first you're hearing about this, consider why this system was created. The system was created thousands and thousands of years ago. Initially as a way in which to be more efficient with transfer of gold and sort of everything else. But now, what is it? It is a source of that all-important word that I used earlier. Control. Money is a source of control. Because if you're so busy paying back debt, you're never going to think. If you're never thinking, you never get a time to breathe, you're always going to feed into the system. Money is by far the most all-pervasive control mechanism that we have today. And whether it's stocks, shares, bonds, it's everywhere. Right? What you're buying is debt. I mentioned earlier that we have a debt-based economy. What a debt-based economy means is that everything we do is based around debt and owing money. So government 1. So government 1. Government 2. Yep. 1 and 2. So government 1 and government 2, they are constantly lending from each other. So each government is backed by each other. Now you imagine this goes on forever, yeah, with different banks, different governments, yeah, and so on and so forth. What you have is that this is the economy. So that when you are tapping into this, when you're you're buying stocks and shares, and you're trying to make money from finance. What you're doing is that you're buying another person's debt. A bond is merely government debt. Yeah? That's all that is. So you are constantly buying someone else's debt. That is how the money system works. And I really try my best not to interact with it because it's fundamentally evil. Now, like I said, I have credit card debt, and I know I shouldn't have credit card debt, but I do. And the reason for that is because sometimes I just don't want to work. I just don't want to work, and I want to really go into something in much greater level of depth in terms of thought, and that's what I do. And then I work out of it. But because I know how this works, I rarely have to tap into it. And when I do tap into it, I try and create something of value for people to buy. But I know I'm contributing into the system, and that bothers me. So how then do you deal with this? Well, money's everywhere. It's all pervasive. Money isn't necessarily evil, but the instruments that are used are. Usury is most certainly evil. No doubt about that. Fractional reserve lending, not so much. But usury most certainly is. So let's look at this, right? So globally, total debt exceeds total money by design. Governments, corporations, individuals all owe trillions more than exists. This isn't a temporary imbalance to be corrected through prudent policy, but rather it is a permanent state that interest-bearing debt requires. Some must always default, some must always lose. The game is rigged not through corruption or incompetence, but through its fundamental mathematics. The rich understand this instinct, which is why they borrow to invest rather than saving to purchase. Debt is a tool when you have assets and access to low rates, but it's a trap when you don't. A property developer borrowing at 3% to build a complex that appreciates at 7% gets rich using other people's money. A worker borrowing at 18% on credit cards to cover rent gets poor doing the same thing. The mechanism is identical, however the outcomes are opposite because the system is stratified. Yeah, something that you guys will hear probably more often than not is OPM. OPM is other people's money. This is how the rich, the people who understand money, this is how they stay wealthy. Because all they need to do is they borrow, let's say they borrow at 5%. Yeah, 5%. So they owe 5% interest on what they borrow. But let's say that they buy a business, and this particular business, well, that's making, well, they bought the business, and it's making 15% profit. Well, what we call here is cash flow covers debt service. That's what that means. So your 5% interest minus the 15 means that really your true profit is 10%. Because this person has bought an asset. That's what that means. Yeah, when you borrow from other people's money. That's banks. The bank is saying, hey, we've got 20,000 people's worth of £100 here. We'll lend that out to someone else and they'll probably get us a really nice return on it, right? The big problem here is that debt obligations outgrow wages. Because your debt, your percentage of interest on a regular, your percentage of interest for a regular person, is like 20%. Your wages aren't increasing at 20%. They're probably increasing at 3%. So if you have long-term debt, well, this is just not going to work, is it? You're always going to get a loser with this system. Always. So, the debt snowballs. So, historically, usury has been outlawed. Right? It's been outlawed everywhere. It was horrible. But it's not. And it transforms really vulnerable people into permanent debtors. There was payday loans that were doing 400% interest. Evil. Absolutely evil. So, I've got some information here about money as a control mechanism throughout time. Nero used to debase the currency, so what he would do there is that he would take his silver coins and he would reduce the value of those silver coins considerably. So let's say one silver coin was worth $1, whatever it was in Roman times. Well, the coin itself wasn't actually worth that much. The coin itself wasn't actually worth that much, but the coin held its value. Also, something else for you all, and I'm looking for a pound coin, but I don't have one, sadly. The reason why coins have those little ridges around the edges is because people used to also chip and cut coins as well to take off the silver. This is mainly done by Jewish people back in the day, so that's why those coins look the way they look. It's an historical. It's an historical drawback to when that happened too. So that's very interesting. But yeah, that's Nero. Medici banking dynasty. So families do this, right? The Medicis, they would lend to governments, they'd lend to the church, they'd lend everywhere. The Rothschild network. I'm not going to get onto the Rothschilds today because there's a lot to go into on the Rothschilds. Now, the Rothschilds are a old banking family that consistently and often screw over countries for their own wealth, for their own, for their own value they're trying to extract. Got some modern financial imperialism here, so you can learn about that if you want to learn about that. Now, this is the big one that I want to talk about. I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to mention it again. Scarcity. Look at that word. Scare. Scarcity is the belief that there isn't enough to go around. We've learned today that money is infinite. Why is it infinite? It's infinite because banks create it. Yeah? If banks can create something out of nothing, that's what money is, by the way. It is something out of nothing. Then we don't need to have any of these boom bust cycles, any of these issues. We don't need to have that. But scarcity, the belief that there isn't enough to go around, well, that creates a fundamental problem. Because again, if you're worried, if you're anxious, you're not thinking. The scarcity mindset transforms systematic injustice into personal failure, ensuring people compete in the system rather than challenging it. The irony is that money isn't actually scarce because we've established it's created freely by banks and governments. But the perception of scarcity does real work. It atomises societies, fragments potential coalitions, redirects anger from structures to individuals. You're not poor because wages haven't kept pace with productivity gains. You're poor because you didn't work hard enough, didn't make smart choices, didn't manage your finances properly. It's easy to say when you're wealthy, when you've got assets, to blame the poor. Yeah, it's easy. I'll be honest with you, I used to do this. Before I understood this, I would demonise the poor. The reason why I do that is because I didn't want to associate myself with them. I didn't want to associate myself with their decisions that they're making. But when I understood usury, I got it. I got that these people aren't evil at all. They're victims. They're victims of a system that is fundamentally designed to keep them exactly where they are. That's what this does. It keeps poor and vulnerable people exactly where they are on the social hierarchy. And the more people that can understand this, the more people that can understand that actually poor people are victims. They're victims of a system. Let me tell you one thing. I'm not saying that the answer here is communism. I'm not saying that at all. At all. I'm not saying that we need to go into a state where, everyone has exactly the same amount of money. If anything, money doesn't solve anything. It doesn't. Right? Money, sure, right? It gets us food, water, housing. Right? It gets us these things. But that's about it. Money then becomes abstract. Right? So this is abstract, yeah? After it becomes abstract, it can then become status. It can then become relationships. Ego. Yeah? And that can then become self-worth. self-esteem, self-image. I understand that money can do these things, but it's not going to buy you happiness. Right? What it can do is that it can build your perception of yourself. But that is about it. That's all that money can do. So if you give a poor person, someone who doesn't understand all this stuff, if you give a poor person money, so I'm going to give, let's go for Bob again. So this is Bob. Say hello to Bob. Bob. If you give Bob £1,000 in stimulus, right? What's Bob going to do? Because Bob's poor, am I right? So I'm going to write that down. So poor. Yeah, poor. He doesn't understand how money works. He's going to buy shoes, fancy food, Netflix. He's going to spend money on his own enslavement. Because he's going to have nothing left over. Nothing is going to appreciate, shoes are going to depreciate. He's not buying assets. Now, let's go for a name, Sam. Now, Sam isn't super wealthy, but he understands how money works. So we're going to put him down as wealthy. He also gets a £1,000 stimulus, okay? Well, what's he going to spend it on? Well, he's going to spend it on assets. He's going to spend it on shoes. He's going to spend it on stocks. Shares. Bonds. Gold. He is going to spend it on things which will either maintain their value or they will increase in value. And that's the difference. When you are buying debt, let's say that Sam here buys Netflix stock. Well, Bob here has just bought a Netflix subscription. So this Netflix subscription is paying for his stock, which should increase in value over time. So over time, let's say that we give, Bob and Sam $1,000 a month for 12 months continuously. And we're going to assume that their material needs are met. Right, so the material needs are met. They don't need any extra food. They don't need any extra water. They need extra housing. It's all met. We're going to make that assumption. Not a real assumption, but it's going to be an assumption. Well, as Bob spends money, he's going to end up exactly where he was before this. He's going to be at 0. Yeah? Whereas Sam, well, he isn't going to be at 0, right? He's received $12,000, $1,000 a month, $12,000 in stimulus. Investing in these particular ways, he's going to have more than $12,000 back. How has he got the extra more $12,000? Because Bob has given it to him through these. This is why I don't believe that we need to have a financial solution to these problems. A financial solution just isn't going to work at all. By the way, I'm writing quickly here. So if you see me make a spelling mistake, tough. I've got terrible handwriting, but you get the idea. A financial solution just feeds into the same system. So there is no financial solution. Communism won't work because of this. And I will tell you a personal story. Girlfriend of mine, an ex-girlfriend of mine, her family was dirt poor. Okay, there was 7 people to a 3-bed house. 7 people. So there's the mum, stepdad, then there was 3 sisters, and 2 brothers. Okay, so 5, 6, 7 people in total. And this house, it was rented. Got a rented house, okay? So these people, the mum worked, by the way, mum worked, and the stepdad, he, a bit of a bum, to be honest with you, so not really relevant in terms of wanting to not work, so I'll put down. And they got the kids. Now, in this rented house, what happened is the stepdad, his family had bought into what they call a community trust. Community trust. Another word for community trust, by the way, is a cooperative. Not the cooperative if you're in the UK, but a cooperative. And what this means is loads and loads and loads of people got together 50 years ago, and they collectively, they put their money together, and what did they buy? They bought houses. Lots of houses. Tons of houses. So this cooperative, this community trust, owned all of these houses. We'll make some more houses there, look. So what happened? Their money went up. But because there was so many people, because there were so many of these people, what happened is that they all decided, well, we'll just take care of our children. So they kept buying houses. They kept buying more and more houses. Because their money, their assets increased in value, and they kept putting money in more and more and more houses. So what took place is that over time, these people, what happened? Sadly, they died. I don't want to laugh, but they died, right? So sadly, they died. And whenever one of these died, well, they had an estate to manage. So the community trust, or the cooperative, the co-op, they had to sell houses. So whenever a house was sold, all of a sudden, cash, rather than being an asset, became liquid. Liquid just basically means that now you've got cash on hand, right? It's not locked. It's not locked up in an asset, right? Because if you've got like 5 acres of farmland, that is an asset that you can use to make more money from it. You can't just get cash. You need to then sell it to get the cash. So now all of a sudden, we've got cash. And because the stepdad, he was what we call a beneficiary. Beneficiary basically means he's put no money in at all in his lifetime, but because he was the son of one of the people that did, he now received cash from this happening. Now, what happened? Because he was poor, he received roughly, this was over 15 months. Over 15 months, he received over £250,000 in cash. In fucking cash, okay? 250 grand in 15 months. And he got that in 4 instalments. Now, not all these were equal. Okay, they're not all equal instalments. Now, we're going to call this person Nick. Not his real name, we'll call it Nick. And this is Nick. So Nick doesn't work. But he's receiving, let's say he's going to get 250k, right? That's what he's got. Now, because Nick is poor, he doesn't know what to do with the money. So what does he do? He spends it. And this is true. This is absolutely true, right? This is a real story that happened that I personally experienced. He spent it on TVs, beds. He spent it on wallpaper. Wallpaper for a rented house, by the way. House was rented. He spent it on carpet. Holidays. He spent it on jewellery. Drink. Dinner. Paying off debt. Cars. And it goes on. Yeah? It goes on and on and on. What are all of these things? Well, what aren't they? They aren't assets. These aren't assets. A TV is not going to appreciate. It's going to depreciate in value. Right? Wallpaper, depreciate in value straight away. Holidays, depreciate in value straight away. Beds, depreciate in value. Carpet, depreciate in value. You can't resell carpets. Jewellery, depreciate in value. It's not just the solid gold. Drinking, no value whatsoever there at all. Dinner, no value whatsoever at all. Right? Paying off debt, fine. He did one good thing. He paid off his debt. You know, cars. What? This person turned £250,000, £250,000, remember, into nothing. Turned it into nothing in 2.5 years. And Nick ended up back into debt. And not only was he back into debt, he's homeless. And I'm not joking about that. He is now homeless. Now, why was it that before this he wasn't homeless, but after this he was? Because he picked up habits that he couldn't afford to keep. This was a one-time payment. He's not getting that yearly. These habits that he didn't have previously, or were minor previously, were enlarged by the influx of cash. If you've got a cocaine habit, there's some cocaine, right? And you're only making, 2k per month, you've got a small cocaine habit. Well, if you now get £6,000 per month, well, you're now going to have a very large cocaine habit, aren't you? Because your money is increasing and so are your habits increasing. He had really bad habits. Spending habits, living habits, etc. So what happened? He couldn't maintain those habits, and by the time the money was gone, the habits were still there. So not only was he ended up in debt, he ended up in more debt than what he started out with. And this is why money does not solve problems of poverty. It doesn't solve it at all. Money doesn't solve problems of poverty because poverty is, guess where poverty is? Poverty is, of course, in the brain. I've hinted at it the entire time. Well, there it is. Poverty is in the brain. It's in the brain. If you want to solve poverty, and I'm talking first world poverty, I'm not talking like, African poverty where the corruption is really high and they've got loads and loads of other issues. I'm talking about real first world poverty where it's not actually necessary at all for people to be in poverty. You need to change this. The mind. The solution to this is really simple. You eliminate usury. Get rid of it. Once you eliminate usury, you educate people about money and how it works, and how it functions. Now, why is it that this will never take place? Why is it that this solution to poverty, first world poverty, will never take place? Because the people that are in charge, the people who have all the power, why would they ever allow that to happen? When you've got people like Nick that are cash cows. He's a cash cow. He makes the whole world go around. That's what he did. That's what he does. Yeah? He makes the whole world go around. Because as long as there's people like him that are feeding the system, then people that understand how it works can make money off of him. Because they're buying his debt. They're buying his bad habits. They're buying his poverty. That's what they're doing. This is and by the way, I didn't make that up. That was a real story. When I was dating that girl with the situation, I believed in communism. I believed in socialism to a degree, and it was seeing this that made me realise that anything which has money at its centre, capital as its centre, just isn't going to function. It's not going to work unless you tackle the mind. Unless you tackle that mind connection, it doesn't matter what you do. You can give these people, millions, and they'll still spend it. I genuinely believe if you start at zero, if you reset everyone to zero, within a year, 2 years, the people who are at the top now will be back at the top again. Because they perceive the world differently. Because of their education has been different than the rest of us. So money, therefore, is a source of control. It is an absolute source of control. And unless, I'll make this dead clear for everybody, the most insidious part about money is consumerism. Because if you're going into debt to buy stuff you don't need, shoes, food, holidays, then you are buying your own slavery. This is the most insidious form of slavery that there is. Because your shackles are your own choices. Right? You have this perception that your own choices are screwing with you. And honestly, they are. They are screwing with you. But the system is designed, with usury, to make this worse. Consumerism is utterly insidious. And I believe it is modern slavery. And the best way to defeat it is to detach yourself from all these things that you don't need. You don't need these things. You don't need them at all. Anyway, that is money. Now, I've wrote here about money as a moral maker. It's about morality and everything else. I'm going to let you guys read this at your own time, at your own leisure, because honestly, this is quite a large topic, and I'm no money expert by any means, but this is just from my own experiences of money and of wealth and everything else. So, the next topic we're going to talk about is religion as our next control mechanism. So, out of the 4 that we've so far done, we have done money, and then now we've got religion to go. Now, I mentioned here quite a lot about faith, belief. I'm not going to be talking about faith or belief that much, about religion, funny enough, because religion is about organised religion. How it is organised in such a way that it controls you. You now know how money controls you, right? By an insidious means called usury, by the system being set up against you. You now know that. Well, next I'm going to talk about religion. By the way, if you want to know what I would do with 250k, this is what I would do with it. First things first, I'd set up trusts, irrevocable trusts. You know, give them 5 children there, I'd give them 20 grand each. Now, in that trust, that money would increase over time. Right, so by the time they all turn 18 or 21 or 25 or whatever it is, that 20k will probably be worth 40k. A lot of money. So what would I have left? I'd have 150k left. I'd then pay off debt. Debtless. What I would then do, now, judging by they're living, you know, they're basically renting. What I would do here is that I'd retrain. Because if I'm not able to actually make money and you know, own a mortgage and all these different bits and pieces, if I want to actually get myself out of this state of servitude permanently, then what I would do is that I would retrain into being something highly useful. Right? Highly useful within the system. Or if I knew someone, I would look at my skills that I have, and I would then bet on those skills. So I'd say, look, let's say if I knew a farmer, I'd, you know, invest in some land that he had. Or I'm a psychologist, I would probably go and buy into a load of networks and start networking with loads of different people so that I would increase the value of my business. So, yeah, if I had that amount of money, I'd create trusts for the children. I would then reinvest that in either retrain or go into a network as well. Your network is your net worth. And I would fundamentally transform that money into assets. And that's the game, guys. It's taking this immaterial thing, money isn't real. I keep saying money isn't real. And turning it into something that is. That's the game. Alright, folks. That's money. I hope you've enjoyed that. And I'll see you for religion in the next video. Hello, folks. If you have enjoyed that video and you don't want to wait for the other 3 and maybe even the other 4 to come out, I'm going to be releasing one of these each month, then you can watch them all right now by going in the description below and joining the school community. It is free to join. So if you're impatient, join that. As I said before, it's totally free and you can watch all of those videos about those levers of power right now. So don't delay, don't wait. If you're impatient, come join my school program. It's totally free and watch them now. Thank you all. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.